All right, it is 10:03, and so in my assumption, I believe we should get started. Is everyone comfortable with that?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. Before we go on to a shared screen, I want to introduce myself. I'm Lynn Brazier. I'm the district chief judge this year, DTM2, been a Toastmaster longer than some people I know have been alive. And so that's what I'm doing here today. I also want to hand off and let Bill Posker introduce himself as your contest manager. Bill?
Thank you, Lynn. I'm Bill Posker, Distinguished Toastmaster ×2. I'm your contest manager chair for this year. And I've been in Toastmasters about as long as Lynn has been in Toastmasters. So you got a couple of old fogies here training you today.
Absolutely. And, special thanks to Bill for actually saying yes to me, which is something I mostly train my friends not to do. So thank you, Bill, and for helping me with this. I appreciate it. All right, so we're going to move this on now to a screen share. If at any time it's not a big group, you have something you want to raise your hand, Bill's going to be watching the chat and the hand wheezing while I'm talking, and we're going to switch off. I'm going to do that for him. So let me go ahead and bring up the presentation. 1 second. Hopefully everybody can see. Somebody want to just shout out? You can?
Yes.
Fabulous. All right. So let's go ahead and take ourselves through this presentation. If you have questions or support, on the screen right now is the email that you will be able to reach me through. There's also some video training on our district through YouTube, as well as in our contest library. Before we get started, and I actually wanted to grab these and send them to you on the chat, so give me 1 second to step away from the presentation. And I will send these off to you guys. These are the links that will take you to the judges' ballots for the 2 contests we're going to be focusing on today. And I am going to share them on the Zoom chat. And I recommend right now, before we get too much into the conversation, that you go ahead and go grab those real quick, because you're going to find them useful when we go into our breakouts. And let me get back here. And again, can everybody see I'm back where I'm supposed to be?
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, so go ahead and grab those, download them while I'm kind of giving you a heads up of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about judging, obviously. We're going to have a couple of speakers who are going to give us some speeches that we're going to be able to use the judges' guides on. And we'll either as a group or breakout, depending on how many of us there are at this point, we'll step over and we'll have some conversation about what those things mean on the back of a judging guide to give us all some comfort with using those. We'll come back from that and we'll start our second portion of our program and talk a little bit about contest chair work. When we get done with that, we'll come back and we'll talk a little about being a chief judge. Does that meet everybody's expectations for what we're doing today? You're allowed to say yes or no.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
There you go. You guys know how much I hate talking to myself. Come on now. All right. So why should people judge? And this is something that people need a little motivation. And so I want to ask you guys a question. Have you ever been to a contest and you didn't support the results?
Yes.
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 And you didn't do what?
You didn't agree with the results.
Oh,
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. So what would be the best way to avoid that happening?
more judges.
More judges. More what? More what kind of judges? Trained judges, people who actually understand the process, have gone through and read the criteria, are comfortable with what those things mean. So that's what we're trying to set you guys up for success with today, is to make sure that not only do you know, but you're also able to maybe point people to this presentation, which we'll hopefully have online, talk to them about what we discussed, and prepare people to actually judge. So let's take a look and really talk about, what does judging mean? Why do we do it? Well, of course, a judge is doing what they do. When they do it, they have committed to those contestants that they are going to give them a fair and impartial review of the work they present. And that's critical to realize, is you're not judging to help your friend, the contest manager or the area director. You're judging for the contestants. You're giving them a gift when you do this, much like an evaluation. You're doing this also for Toastmasters International. When we have a contest like this and people walk away scratching their heads, it doesn't help build up the organization. And that's something we really want to do, is maintain that integrity as an organization. For the audience, we are judging because they deserve to see an entertaining and fair and well-run event. So that's the reason that we're committing our time to help. And of course, for ourselves, we always, every time we do anything in Toastmasters, timing, counting, vote counting, whatever it might be, we're doing that because we are trying to improve ourselves and we want to be very, very good at what we do. So based on that, does everybody want to do this still? That's a question that reads a yes.
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 Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
I'll have you guys eventually. All right, let's talk about it then.
Mm.
So let's talk about what it is to be a judge versus evaluator. So look at some of the ideas up here. Which ideas would you guys that you see up here think that both a judge and evaluator needs to have?
Good
Good
listener,
listening. Mhm.
Absolutely.
confidential,
Absolutely. Good, Vigil. All right. So
great
what,
delivery,
absolutely.
none
now-
of those others.
Thank you, that's better.
What would an evaluator need to have that a judge does not?
All
Speech
of those.
objectives,
Right?
Speak the objectives.
All right.
suggested improvements.
Improvements.
Absolutely. A
Mhm.
judge never talks to a contestant about their speech. Everybody else can, the judge should not. What else?
Analysis of the content.
Okay. All right. So what about a judge? What should they be doing that nobody else is doing?
Confidential.
Pick the
Yes.
best
Pick
speech.
the best speech.
Perfect. Pick the
And
best
pick the
speech.
best.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Has
yes.
nothing to do with anything else on here. The well, it does have a lot to do with everything else on it. It leads up into the picking the best speech. An evaluator is not trying to pick a winner. An evaluator is trying to support the person who's speaking and provide them with feedback. So that goes back to analysis of context, suggest improvement that will help that person improve in meeting their speech objectives. A judge, while they both have to be great listeners, they're both rating the delivery, a judge is going to be confidential about picking the very best speech. Does anybody have any questions about the very thin line between these two roles?
Yes, for the judge is when the results are very similar to other judges. I will say that it was a very good judging.
So, and I'm sorry, what was the question?
No, it's just an
Oh, okay.
observation.
Oh, okay. I was like, okay, I didn't hear the
But
lot.
If you have, for example, 3 judges and all the 3 they had the same results, it was a really good observations working as a judge.
That's true, and I gotta say that's a rarity because we're snowflakes. Each one of us is a little bit different. Each one of us is a little unique, and I think that it's fun to see how people do come up with their solutions on this. And if you do get a sweep of where everybody 100% agrees, you know, as you're doing that you have just seen one heck of a speech.
Yes, I mentioned this because I have the opportunity to be a judge 3 times, and I was surprised that my results was like being like a new participant. I was so surprised to see similar results with other people, with other judges, and I said, "Oh, that's good for me."
Absolutely, high five, right? I
Yes.
got that right. And that's definitely, I have a few friends that I really will turn to after when I'm not really judging, because it's not my business, turn to them and ask them for their ranking when they're not really judging, just to see how we all did in making that assumption. So it is fun to see if everyone who's not trying to confidentially really judge a contest, what everybody thinks, something you can do amongst friends. All right.
Lynn, one of the things you have up there is speech objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And that one's kind of a wobbly line, because while a speech evaluator evaluates speech objectives, a judge does have objectives on the back of the form that they should be aware of.
Right.
I have been to so many tall tale contests where the winner gave a great humorous speech. but it wasn't
Absolutely.
a tall tale. And it really irritates me when that happens.
I agree. I once lost to someone who didn't meet the objectives. I was really sad. So, but remember that while the back of the objectives that are on the back are absolutely, and we're something we're going to spend some time on today, who's really looking at, here's the 3 or 4 things you're supposed to accomplish in a speech is your evaluator, but who's looking at, did you meet the back of a judging form? So you're right. It is one that definitely blurs across the lines, just like good listener does. All right. Anybody else have anything they want to add on that one? Terrific. Let's keep going. All right. So let's talk about what the qualities of a good contest judge are. And for these things, we want to make sure when we're talking to people about judging, no matter what contest we're asking them to judge, that these are things that we know they are comfortable and they understand that they are committing to make the accuracy of what they are doing. So they need to make sure that when they're doing this, you don't just slap a few names on a file. You absolutely need to be accurate in what you are putting on that file. So a good judge is going to complete their paperwork correctly. And that's something that is required everywhere. You can't apply for your driver's license with it to slap together application. You can't do a judging with just a slap together. You need to make sure you get it right. Totally impartial. And there's so many things that can impact a speech and how you feel about it and how you feel about the contestants. And we'll talk a little bit about those. But as a judge, you're absolutely not supposed to have any partiality toward a speaker, a topic. You don't agree with what they said, it doesn't matter. How did they present that speech? Did they meet the objectives on the back of your form? That's what you're looking to judge, not how you feel about the person, the topic, the setting, any of those things. You got to be really trustworthy. You got to make sure that you are 100% understanding that what you've committed to do, you're committed to the things that are on this sheet, and you've committed to the back of your form. We got to be able to trust that you're going to make a decision based on what you're supposed to make that decision on. And the next one is, of course, why you are all here today. We got to be knowledgeable. We got to know what are the critical things that we need to have in place to have a contest. We know that we're not going to make exceptions to those rules. And so if you're here and you're learning to do this, then you're going to be more comfortable, and hopefully anybody listening to this presentation will also be more comfortable on how to judge properly. And you see this one's coming up again. They're good listeners. They don't get distracted during the speech. Don't answer your phone. Don't talk to your neighbor. Don't do any of those things that pull your attention away. Because we all talk about how much we love to multitask, but multitasking in a situation like this is going to take you away from the primary thing you've committed to do, which is to listen and observe that speaker and to provide them with a fair and accurate judging. Sound good, everybody? I see a chat. Does somebody have something they
Yes.
want to add? Nope. All right.
I didn't put anything in the chat, but I do have a comment real quick.
Okay.
So one of those qualities was totally impartial. Obviously, with a comedy speech, there's opinions on what is comedic and what's not. How do you draw the line between being impartial towards one speech because you think it's funny versus another speech that you know is funny, but you didn't laugh at?
When we get to the judging criteria, that's hopefully going to help you with that question. When we look at the back of what it does, and somebody brought up early when we were just chatting about how hard it is in a Zoom environment to know how the audience is impacted by a speech. And with humorous, that's actually a pretty important thing to know. If nobody laughed, then no matter whether you thought it was funny or not, nobody else laughed. That's a merit that you're unable to give a result on. And so really to your point, you absolutely have your own opinion of how it impacted you, but you're the only person you're able to give that feedback on in a Zoom contest. When you do it in person, you have 100 people there to help you make that decision. But when you do it with just you, it's just your opinion. So you're still being impartial because you gave your opinion as an audience member. Does that help?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Point of order.
Yeah.
I cannot see your PowerPoint because I clicked on the link in the chat to see what it was. And then I went to go back and I'm not able to see your PowerPoint. I can see you guys, but I can't see the PowerPoint.
How odd. All right. Let's see if we can stop sharing and
Okay,
start
now I
sharing
see.
again and see if it helps. That sound like
Okay.
a plan for everybody? How about
Okay.
now?
Yeah, yes, I can see it now.
Great. All right. Hey, a little flexibility always helps, right?
Great, thank you.
All right. Any other comments on this slide before we proceed?
Questions about good conduct judging?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. All right, let's go on then. And I've got to reconnect to my thing. There we go. All right, so let's talk a little bit about completing the top of the international and humorous ballots. And what you're looking for, and we're gonna deep dive into these in just a little bit, is the content. That is one of the most critical components of the speech. Did it do what it was supposed to do? So what is speech development? We all are Toastmasters. Speech development means putting together an entire package, right? A speech that's going to go from beginning to end, hold your audience together, help them understand what you were presenting. There are 3 critical components to every speech: an opening, a body, and a conclusion. And
Yep.
any of it, not that you could ever miss the body, but if you didn't do one of those pieces, and especially I think the conclusion to wrap up, or the opening to grab your audience, then you have not presented a successfully composed speech. It needs to really engage your audience. It needs to go like a good song. It needs to start with those opening notes that grabs the attention of the audience. It needs to present a good story about what the artist is trying to share. And then it needs to bring the audience to the conclusion that you want them to get to. If you're giving a speech about gun control and your idea was that everyone should be registered for a gun, by the time you finish that speech, you want everyone to understand why you believed it was important that everyone register to own a gun, whatever that might be. So that's really what an effective speech is supposed to do, and how development plays a part in that. But effectively, again, you want to make sure they understood what you were doing up there. If you gave that speech about gun control and everyone thought you gave a speech about going hunting with your friends, then you really didn't communicate your purpose. They didn't understand what you were there for, and if they didn't understand it, then your speech did not support the purpose you were intending to communicate. Everybody makes sense? And then lastly, of course, is the value. I mean, if I got up today and gave a speech about putting together the ice maker in my refrigerator with detailed instructions about each point, you don't have the same refrigerator I have. What's your WIFM? What's in it for you to listening to my speech? Unless I'm funny. In that case, that would be the WIFM for. Yeah, if I was funny and amused you with the story of me putting together the ice maker, then it's something meaningful. I gave you a laugh. But if all I did is read the instruction manual to something you didn't have, there's no value to you having listened to that speech. So we're talking about content. We're talking about development, effectiveness, and value. And those are, as judges, and I think Dakota will call me on this, those are squishy, those are personal opinions. But yes, that's why we have more than one judge, because those personal opinions come together about how did that content engage their speaker, their audience. Then absolutely you've got something that made a difference to your audience. And that's what you're looking to do there. And then let's talk a little bit about delivery. And delivery is probably one of the more challenging things that you find in a Zoom presentation. Is even today, talking to you guys with this screen in front of me and you can't see me. As I speak, my hands move. I can't stop that. That's what I'm supposed to do as a speaker. I'm supposed to gesture and use facial expressions. I'm smiling at you guys all right now. You just don't know it. Those things are critical to the words that come out of my mouth. I can't do it without a good backup physicality. I have to move my hands. I have to smile at you. I have to have my eyes engaged in looking straight at the screen, even if I'm not looking at all of you, because those things make what I'm saying more powerful. So the same thing applies to someone who is speaking in a contest. They don't have the benefit of a PowerPoint up in front of them. So you're having to look at them. And as a speaker in a contest, you want to make sure in a Zoom contest that you know how to really own your space. You want to know what gestures are going to stay on the screen. The ones that go flying off the edges aren't going to be very helpful. And the most critical component of a Zoom speaker is your face. Your face is having to do a lot of the work that normally would be done by bodily movement. Voice, same thing. Anybody ever listen to a speaker who speaks 100% in monotone? We're going to in a little bit. I have a presentation I'm going to show you guys where the guy is very consistent with his speech. If I let him speak at the rate that he wants to speak at, I'd take a nap. And so you've got to have those ups, those downs, those pitch changes. You have to have the emotion within your voice to be successful. So that's critical to the delivery of the speech is, are you using all your tools? And in a Zoom contest especially, are you using all your tools? And manner, speaking with enthusiasm, showing an interest in what y'all are receiving is a very important part of what we are talking about when we talk about delivery. All right. Any questions about delivery?
And one of the things I noticed last year in the Zoom environment is that there were a handful of contestants that clearly had their speech written on their screen and were reading it. And I think that that's one thing, it's kind of a quote cheat that you can do in the Zoom environment if you're good at it, that you can't do in a live contest. But it was something that I observed happening quite a bit last year.
I hear you. And as a judge, what did you, were you judging in any of those contests?
Yes,
And did it impact how you felt about delivery?
yes, absolutely. Because I felt it was a cheat.
I guess I wouldn't say it was a cheat as much as I would say with all the other important components that you need to do. If you're speaking and don't know your speech, then how are you going to incorporate everything else in that speech that is important? The physicality, the vocal variety, your enthusiasm. I personally think that is one of my biggest strengths as a speaker is how I use my voice.
Yeah.
And if I'm reading, so I'm not preparing for the next word I say, speak with enthusiasm, show interest in audience. It's going to be harder for me to act on my words if I don't know what they're going to be.
And physical is only a 10-point category, but it is a 10-point category. And
Right.
they just didn't get those 10 points.
Right. Absolutely. That's one thing you can 100% do. But I think everybody will definitely notice someone's doing something like that. Your eyes are in the wrong place, in my opinion, when you're trying to read from a screen. If you have a teleprompter, then you're probably okay. You've got a big screen up in front of you that's not related to the one you're staring at. But definitely, I think that would impact my score if I thought someone was that unengaged with their speech.
Yes.
PJ.
Yeah, I would mark down effectiveness
Valid point.
if they're reading their speech.
Good point.
That's all.
All right. Put your hand down. I always forget to do that, so I figure I should tell you. I raise my hand and then I forget to put it down. So, all right.
Excuse me, I have a question. My eyes were damaged at birth, so they don't track right. What do you do about that?
When you're speaking on Zoom?
Yeah.
As the speaker?
Yes, because I'm competing.
Ah, okay. As long as you were, well, then obviously, Amy, you're not reading your speech.
No, I'm visually impaired.
So as long as your gestures, your voice, and your manner, your facial expressions are still there. You can still smile when you're excited about something you're talking about. You can still grimace when you're talking about pain.
Oh, yes.
As long as you can do all those things, then your eyes not making, because we can't really make eye contact. We're looking at a little hole in the top of our computer.
Okay,
So you're really probably you're not going to feel like you're going to get a lot of penalty for that fact.
Okay, I just wanted to just double check.
Absolutely. All right.
Okay.
All right, let's go on. So let's continue with some of the other portions of the speech as we're talking about it. Language. If I say y'all, that is grammatically correct. I'm just telling y'all it is, but only for me because I'm from the South. So there are things we can say. We could swear in a speech, and it's going to be up to the judge to decide if it was appropriate and correct. And that's going to be your opinion. You're the judge. You get to make that decision. If you are in an audience at church and you start swearing, is that aligned with the audience's expectations?
No.
Probably not. That's not what I expected to happen at church today. So those are the things that you want to think about for that criteria. In the humorous, as we brought up, audience response, did the speech hold the audience attention? Did people understand and laugh? And we talked about this before the session started recording, and we've touched on it again. This one's a hard one to do on Zoom. You have no idea. You are the only audience that you can make that decision from based on. And there's really nothing you can do about that fact in this environment. So just keep that in mind. So earlier, Dakota, you asked, hey, if I laughed and is that making me impartial? No, you're the audience. So did it hold your attention? Did you understand and laugh at the speech? If you didn't, then you're going to rate that one quite low. All right. So judges, remember, only use these criteria to select a winner. If somebody dressed in purple and green and they looked horrible, that is not really something that is part of your criteria. If someone wore a ski mask, that's not part of your criteria. If it impacted something else and how your effectiveness of because you couldn't use your facial expressions, yeah, you're going to get them for the ski mask. But if you just thought it was weird and it made no impact on the reception of the speech, then there's no place for that in this guide. All right. If you 100% know, and on Zoom we do because the timing's up there. If you 100% know that the time was wrong, that should not make a difference. Somebody went over, it doesn't matter if they're your winner, they're your winner. Any questions on that? And then of course, the last one, which you go back to confidentiality, including to the contestant, don't discuss it. No discussion about anything we're doing here. A judge, especially at the Area Plus, is supposed to be, and it's a little harder in person, but it's supposed to be someone who is completely anonymous. Okay.
I have
Any
a
questions?
quick question.
Yeah.
I do. So you said something about regarding judges, the second one about timing. If they go overtime, they're not disqualified, or they're what was
Nothing to
that?
do with how the judges is doing their job. The disqualification is somebody else's job.
Oh, okay.
Not my job, man, as the comedian said. So your job is not to care. If you know, you're still not supposed to care. You don't know, maybe there's a malfunction of a timing light. You have no idea. So don't use that as part of your criteria.
So you're just looking at, like, even though it's not speech content, what you're looking at with content is like, did the speaker conclude what the audience wanted? Like it matched the speech. And then were their body language and gestures and all that coinciding with their speech? That's what you look at, right?
Right. As a speaker, 100%, you want to have been very clear on what it says in the back of this judging form.
Okay.
All right. So the upper portion of the judge's ballot is where we're going to mark during our minute of silence how people did in our opinion. And how you mark that is absolutely up to you. There are, I think, as many methods as there are humans of how they do that. But I want to also clarify one other thing. There has to be silence. And that isn't as hard on Zoom, but it also applies to chat. It has to be silence. And that a contest can only resume, and this is a new rule, once the contest chair says, Madam Chief Judge, do you have all the ballots? Yes. Now the contest can start. Chief Judge is going to leave the room, but until that conversation takes place, you can't start over again. That's a new, I think we all have always done it, but that's a new put into the rules. All right, so the lower portion, you're going to mark, yes? Somebody say
What do
something?
you mean you can't start over again? What does that mean?
You can't start with the next interviews or any of those things, you know,
Ah,
that you
thank
can't
you.
start giving announcements. Don't give the floor to one of our trio to start giving their announcements when you haven't cleared that the chief judge is ready and is leaving.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, lower portion must be marked with the contestants ranked 1 through 3 by every judge. You must sign and print your name on that. Now we're going to talk a little bit about another solution that we might be putting in place. And we're going to do this a little harder when you're talking about doing this on Zoom, but whatever methodology you're using has to have a submitted ballot that you can verify came from that judge. Okay. If Bill sends in Lynn's judging form, there's something wrong. All right. So when a ballot is complete, the judge in person would tear off the bottom and hand it in an envelope to the ballot counter, and then discreetly get rid of every bit of evidence of this contest. All right. So let's talk a little bit about objectivity. When you're marking it, remember to focus on the speech, not the ballot. You can use your notes later during that minute of silence. You can use a plus and minus system in the categories to determine your score. And if you're doing this on a sheet of paper, make sure you hide the results of one speaker before you do the next. You're not comparing the speakers, you're just judging the speech. And then a couple of things that you want to be careful about is don't let that first speaker be your baseline, and don't hold them accountable that they're the first speaker either. I'm going to save some points because they're first. You don't want to give extra credit just because you remember that last speech. So you want to teach them each individually. Don't give a halo to a great speaker you've heard speak before. We have a few fantastic speakers in Arizona. And sometimes when we're oh, you know, so-and-so is going to speak. Woo-hoo! Yeah, this is going to be fantastic. In contrast, don't say, oh, well, so-and-so is going to speak and they're fantastic, so I'm going to give extra credit to this other speaker I've never heard before, because they're the underdog. All right, any questions about objectivity before I move on to the fun part of our program? None. All right, so I'm going to come off here. Everybody have their printout of judging, or at least some notes in which to make it, because we're now going to hear from our 2 prepared speakers. And what I'm hoping you guys will do, because I'm not doing it, I've done this before. I'm hoping all of you will do is mark down and judge that speech. And we're going to need to move the focus off of me onto the speaker. And our first speaker is going to be Julia. So we'll switch over to Julia, and everybody put your thing in speaker view if you want. And let's listen to Julia. And Julia, I don't have your introduction, so I'm going to trust you to just give it for me. Don't laugh. I can't hear you.
Don't start the time until I introduce myself then. Julia Sayer, Silver Years. Silver Years, Julia Sayer. Fellow Toastmasters, contest chair, have you ever thought there was something sneaking up behind you, but when you turn and look, there's nothing there? I have, and I figured out what it is. It's old age. You could see it in the graying of your hair or silver hair. You might see it with a few wrinkles on your face, or you could hear your joints creaking. When I go up and down the stairs, I hear my knees click and creak. Do you? All my hair is turning silver. I noticed a gray hair back in my 30s, and now there are more gray hairs than brown. Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought there's something missing on my face? I have. I looked in the mirror one day and I thought, my eyebrows look really moth-eaten. And then I thought, oh my God, do moths or mites actually eat human facial hair? And I made a note to ask my doctor at the next visit. She took my question seriously. She asked me to take off my glasses, and she looked very closely at my eyebrows, and she said, You're actually not missing any hair in your eyebrows, Julia. Those hairs have turned silver and they just don't show up very well now. You are missing a few hairs. It's not uncommon to lose a hair or two when you reach the silver years. And about those creaking joints and those bodily noises, I prided myself on the fact that I was not a snorer. When I would go on a trip with a friend, we could share a hotel room, and I would know that I would sleep quietly and not cause them to awaken in the middle of the night with my snoring. Until about 3, maybe 4 years ago, when all of a sudden I started to wake myself up when I snore. I've always been a really light sleeper. And all of a sudden, I hear this noise. And there it was. I'm waking myself up. I don't know why I've suddenly started snoring. At this point, I'm just going to attribute it to the aging process. Another thing, when you look really closely in the mirror and you start seeing that those creases in your forehead have become permanently etched, or the crow's feet at the edge of your eyes, at this point in my life, I'm simply grateful that wrinkles don't cause pain. It's been interesting aging. And when I was at my doctor's, and we talked about my eyebrows and a little bit of hair loss and some of the other signs that I'm getting a little older, she said to me, Julia, there are 4 things you need to remember when it comes to aging that are normal signs of aging. 1, you start to lose a little bit of memory. 2, you do get that silver or gray hair. You might lose some of your hearing. And the 4th one, oh yeah, the 4th one is you start to have a little bit of memory loss. So for me, another sign of aging is the fact that I look at my 2 grown daughters. They're in their 40s. Then I started getting the notices from AARP to join. And this last year, I've gotten a new kind of notice in the mail, the email, and on the Facebook page because they know how old I am. I'm getting invitations to start looking into Medicare because next year I will be eligible for government-funded health insurance, which doesn't make me unhappy because most of my friends who are on Medicare have told me that it's much better than the group policy they had at their employers. So, and cheaper too, apparently. We'll find out. I'm supposed to meet with a Medicare advisor in February to figure out which Medicare plan or choice is the best for me. So as I look into next year when the government does become my health insurer, and I look forward and realize that it's not that long until I'm going to actually be deciding what to do about retiring. I just want to say that I'm grateful my body still works well. I can still go on a 6-mile hike in the mountains. I'm still competent to drive. And even though I may not remember things as well as I used to, my memory still seems relatively sharp. And I tend to remember to show up for events that I signed up for most of the time. Believe me, the cell phone reminders help. And I have a piece of advice for you. If you're ever walking along and you think there's something sneaking up behind you, but when you look, nothing is there, it may be old age, and be grateful for it because it's better than the alternative. Madam Contest Chair.
Thank you, Julia. And I just want to make sure everyone realizes, because we don't care about timing, we didn't time that speech. I'm trusting Julia to have done the speech in the right amount of time. And I didn't, and again, on my apologies, I didn't tell you that we were using our humorous speech for evaluation for that speech. Can I now have a minute of silence, and I will time that, to make sure everybody gets a chance to update their ballot? Time. All right, hopefully everybody took that time to fill out their ballot, and we're going to hear from our second speaker now. And again, I don't have your intro, Dawn, so before we start imaginary timing, please introduce yourself and your speech, and Dawn will be giving us the speech for the international criteria. Dawn?
Don Ratliff, Mrs. Gill's third grade class. Mrs. Gill's third grade class, Don Ratliff. Madam Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters, and honored guests. For far longer than most of you have been alive, I had a deep-seated fear of public speaking. And it all began when I was 8 years old in Mrs. Gill's third grade class. She had given us an assignment to read a book and then at the end of the week to do an oral book report. And now it was the end of the week. I can still recall her turning to me and saying, Dawn, if you would, please step to the front of the room and give us your report. Yes, Mrs. Gill. As I began my long and arduous trek to the front of the room, my heart was pounding, my chest was tight, and I could barely breathe. And when I reached the front of the room and turned to face my classmates, it happened. My brain froze and I couldn't remember a single thing that I wanted to say. Has that ever happened to you? It's terrifying, isn't it? And as I stood there like a deer in the headlights, my classmates started laughing at me. It was the most painful and embarrassing moment of my young life. After what seemed like an eternity, Mrs. Gill said, Dawn, you can take your seat. But by then, the seed of a very powerful limiting belief had been planted. And in the coming years, when it happened again and again, that seed took root. I came to believe that there was something wrong with me. I came to believe that I must have a defective brain. Why else would it let me down at such important moments of my life? And as a result of that belief, I made a decision that I was going to avoid situations where I'd be called on to speak in public. After all, it was just too painful. Fast forward to the year 2009. A dear friend of mine was getting married and he asked me to be the best man at his wedding. I was overjoyed, and before I realized the full implication of my answer, I'd already said yes. It was only later that evening that I realized that one of my responsibilities as his best man would be to give a speech, the best man's toast. And with that realization, I started to panic. And my mind took me back to that painful experience in Mrs. Gill's third grade class. My brain had already proven itself to be an unreliable ally. And I didn't think I would be able to remember all the things that I would want to say about this incredible man. So I made a decision that I was going to write out my speech. And when it came time, I was going to read it. It's not what I wanted to do, but it's what I believed I had to do if I had any hope of getting through it. When the disc jockey handed me the microphone, I picked up my notes, said a quick prayer, and I started to read it. And everything was going just fine until all of a sudden, it happened. A gust of wind came along and folded my papers in half. I had to stop, find my place, and start over. And before I was able to complete the best man's toast, it happened 3 more times. I was so embarrassed. I was humiliated. I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. And after I handed the microphone back to the disc jockey, I walked to a darkened area at the far end of the property because I wanted to be alone with my pain and my shame. And with tears pouring down my cheeks, I made a commitment to myself and I said I would never, ever let that happen again. Fellow Toastmasters, sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before the pain of remaining the same is so great that it compels you to face your greatest fear. That night was my rock bottom. And 3 weeks later, I walked through the doors of Unity Speakers Toastmasters Club and I signed up. I was finally ready to face my greatest fear. Not long after I began my journey in Toastmasters, I made a startling discovery. I didn't have a defective brain after all. All those years I've been experiencing the effects of a condition that we learned about in grade school, a condition known as fight or flight. You see, when a human being is experiencing a high level of anxiety, such as you might experience if you're in the wild facing a hungry lion, your brain is going to shut down all non-essential brain function not related to your survival. Because when you're in the wild facing a hungry lion, you don't need your memory. You just run. And that's what we do in Toastmasters. Through practice and repetition, we learn to lower our anxiety levels such that fight or flight doesn't kick in. And as we become more confident and more competent as speakers, we're able to stand on a stage and remember what it is that we wanted to say. All those years, all that pain, all those missed opportunities, living with the mistaken belief that I had a condition that might need medical treatment, when in reality, all the treatment I needed was readily available for me here in Toastmasters. And I'm grateful for having received that treatment, because now, as you can see, I'm doing things that my wildest imagination I never imagined was possible. And the truth of the matter is, whether or not you have any desire to be a professional speaker or not, there are going to be times in your life when you're going to be called on to speak in public. Perhaps it'll be a friend's wedding, a friend or family member's funeral, or on behalf of a cause that you're passionate about. And the question is, will you have the confidence to stand up and say, yes, I will do it? Or will you do like I did for so many years and live with the regret of having said no? My father passed away several years ago. And because of the confidence that I had gained in Toastmasters, I was able to stand at his funeral and say everything I wanted to say without having to use notes. That was a turning point for me in my life. And my encouragement for you, fellow Toastmasters, is do what you need to do today in Toastmasters. So when those opportunities come your way, you'll have the confidence to stand up and say, yes, I'll do it. Madam Contest Chair.
Thank you, Don. All right, we're going to ask for 2 minutes so everyone can finish their evaluation of both our speakers. And then at the end of 2 minutes, and boy, isn't 2 minutes a long time of silence on a Zoom, we're going to come back and break out to discuss. All right. At this point, if we were at a real contest, the judges would have their ballots up in the air. We'd be collecting them and we'd say, Madam Contest Chair, Madam Chief Judge, do you have all the ballots? They would say yes. Those people would leave the room and we would proceed with the entertainment until they returned. But what we're going to do differently here today is you all downloaded those forms and you've spent a little time judging today. So our illustrious Zoom master is going to send everyone but Bill and I into breakout rooms. If you get one of the speakers, maybe you want to be nice to them. But what you're looking to do is flip over that form and talk about during their speeches what they did to meet those objectives. Any questions about this plan? All right, sounds good. We are not going to be recording breakout rooms. So at this point, we're going to pause the recording of this event for anybody who's watching. If you watch this as a recording, do the same thing we just encouraged. Welcome back, everybody. Our recording has restarted. And since those who might be listening to this training by themselves didn't get to participate in that fun and games, can I get anybody to tell me a couple of areas they thought our humorous Julia speaker was really successful in her presentation from your conversations? Somebody does have to
Leaning
talk.
toward the camera.
Awesome. And where did you feel that you, in your judging, said, this is where I'm giving her credit for that?
manner, and physical.
Good. Okay. Anybody else have something they want to shout out that she did really well, and where they gave the props? You guys just spent 20 minutes with this. Come on, help me out here. You got to help the people who were listening. What else? What did she do well in development?
Her speech was very well organized. I liked how it flowed, and at the very end, it came back to the beginning.
Thank you, Wendy. Exactly what I wanted to hear. Anybody else want to throw anything in there? Something your group felt was very, very, or could have been done more? What could have been done more that maybe there's a couple of places that we lost a couple of tick points?
This is Jim. Well, the only part that I would have liked Julia for the humorous speech is more excitement or more passion, more of the voice variation tonal, because I would have liked, because this was humorous, I would have liked, and this is what I shared in our breakout room, I would have liked Julia as she came real close to the screen and she was saying, "Oh, I'm looking at my hair." You should have screamed like, "Oh my God, you know what I mean?" I think that would have added more drama and more humor. So that's what I would have said, because I would have, and Julia, I just want to let you know, I didn't see any wrinkles. You have really smooth skin.
How about anything else? Anybody else have any opportunities that they would have seen on their judging that they want to share?
Yeah, I'd like
Okay.
to share a follow up with Jim on that. And I said it earlier when Julia mentioned about the wrinkles, the lashes. She have to feel it in order to the audience to feel it as well. If she feel happy and humorous on herself, the audience can attract that and we will be smiling. Remember, like Dawn mentioned earlier also, it's not about the speaker that they can remember. It's how they feel on that while listening to that speech.
PJ has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just something to consider, Julia, is the audience attendance. You know, this speech for me was something I could understand well because I'm way beyond any of your ages. But if there are lots of younger people in the audience, there wasn't anything directly to the young in the audience. So that's just something to consider. You might want to put in there.
Awesome.
Secondly, the title of your speech was Sober Years. I was expecting something on recovery.
I think it was Silver Years.
Silver.
Oh, it was silver. So I misunderstood. One of the things that you lose as you age is hearing.
All right, let's do the same for Dawn. Was there anything that Dawn did exceptionally well that anyone wanted to call out that they were really impressed in their evaluation or their judging? Betty?
He showed emotion. And I felt the emotion. And it was a very serious speech, but he dropped in a couple of humorous lines to give the audience relief.
And where did you give him credit in your judging for those traits?
Speech development, physical, voice, and mannerism.
Awesome. Anybody else have anything they
And
want
so
to add?
he can get points in multiple categories for doing one thing.
Absolutely. Anybody else have anything to add on something that was exceptionally well received for your judging?
I thought he did a really good job of matching his facial expressions to his vocal variety.
I agree.
That they were really melded together so that they were one thing almost. So, you know, those would have easily dropped into the categories of physical and voice.
Wonderful. Any opportunities anyone wants to call out?
I thought maybe when he hit rock bottom, he could put more emphasis in his body movement.
I would agree. Awesome.
That would be something. And additionally, I thought at the ending of the speech in your summarization, to somehow get back to the 3rd grade. I mean, it was a selling, for me, it was a selling of Toastmasters at the end. And the speech led up to that, but the speech was really more than selling of Toastmasters. It's for people that to not lose and not believe everything you hear when you're younger and that type of thing. So maybe somehow bringing it back to the 3rd grade, maybe more focus on the speech itself as opposed to Toastmasters. I know for him that was the solution, was Toastmasters, but for the audience, of course, they're going to all be, well, they may or may not all be Toastmaster members. So maybe some in the audience have other issues that they went through. And there were lots of things in that speech that could lend itself to recovery for others as well.
And where on your judging form do you think that you would have lost a couple of points for those, PJ?
I think effectiveness, you know, in the content of the speech.
Awesome.
For me.
So hopefully that this exercise has given y'all a little bit of a feeling of, you know, what this all means. It's sometimes a very lonely island to be judging. To get to talk about a judging opportunity is something I wanted you guys to get to do today. And now we're going to move over to let Mr. Posker talk for a little bit about the role of the contest chair. So Bill, you ready to take this show? And I'll get.
I am. You're going to drive the slides for me? Absolutely. So as the contest chair, the first question I would have to ask anybody that is going to be a contest chair is, what is your responsibility for the contest? What is your responsibility for the contest? The only answer is to ensure that your contest is conducted in a quality manner with trained judges and get a quality result where no one will question those results. Let me repeat that one more time. To ensure that your contest is conducted in a quality manner with trained judges to get a quality result where no one will question those results. To start with, you always need to get yourself a contest chair checklist. You can start on this at any time. Many of you have already selected the dates and times for your contest in your areas and your divisions. Who's ever going to be the contest chair should start a checklist. This first section is just basically maybe for just clubs right now, since all the other contests are going to be on Zoom. Your clubs may be meeting in person. They would need to determine a budget for the contest. If they're in a space that charges for their attendance, they need to consider those fees. If they're going to have any fees, make sure that they break even on the expenses and that the contestants do not have to pay any of the fees. Determine your agenda for the contest. I know on the district website, as well as on Toastmaster International website, you can print a contest agenda, which would give you some idea. It's basically no different than an agenda that you would have for your club meetings. Obviously, it's geared towards a contest and not a meeting, but just have that ready to go and fill in what you need to have filled in. And then obtain your materials, whether this is like we did today, we dropped it in a chat, or however you choose to send it out. Make sure that you go online to either aztoastmasters.org and get all the links to the documents you need, the eligibility link, the documents, the ballots, the timers and counter sheets, your speaker profile, the result forms. These are all very important in which to run your contest. Next slide, Lynn. So, responsibilities. Well, your first responsibility is to select a chief judge and a contest manager. You don't necessarily need to have a contest manager. If you, as a contest chair, want to do all of that role, you can. But the more people you have on your team, the easier it makes it for you in supporting the contest. Notify the contest officials at the time and place of contest and briefings. Promote the contest. That's very important. The more people you have participate in the contest as an audience member, the more successful your contest will be. And then as a contest chair, you need to ensure the eligibility of those that are speaking. For alternates, if the primary is not present at the contest, then the alternate will participate in the briefing and give their speech. If the contest begins and the contest chair or Toastmaster is introduced, the primary is disqualified and the alternate participates if the primary has not shown up during that introduction. If the primary does arrive after the briefing, but before the introduction, they must notify the chair and they waive the right to the introduction. So as a contest chair, you kind of have to watch out. Are all your contestants there? Are they eligible before your contest actually starts? And then you can throw in the alternates if you need to. Get that stuff rolling. Next slide. Now, as far as selecting people, I just want to throw this in real quick. Selecting people to be your judge or your contest manager or possibly interns or club officers for these roles. Here's the twist. If you're a division director, try not to use any of your area directors for your contest roles. Let's just look for people within your clubs that can fulfill these roles, because it's part of growth. And that's what everybody gets into leadership for, is to try these roles out. Select new individuals that you can be mentored and train their roles. Isn't our role as a Toastmaster to mentor other people? Contest briefings. The contest chair will brief the contestants. This includes drawing for speaker position and provide to chief judge ASAP. Now I'm going to pause right at this section. We had some discussion about, as a Zoom meeting, what's the best way to do that? And it was suggested to set up a group text message between the chair, the chief judge, your timers, even your judges, so that you can just go on your phone and give them the information that you need. They get it instantly. If you put it in the chat, sometimes that gets lost. Maybe somebody doesn't read it. And you want to have that quick communication between the group that's putting the contest on. Verify the presence of all your contestants and name pronunciation. Please make sure that you get their names right. I think nothing is a little bit more challenging than stumbling over somebody's name during a contest. Present the contest rules. As a chief judge, you'll review the speaker's certifications and eligibility and originality. You'll review the timing protocol with the speakers. And you'll acquaint the contestants with the online speaking area. We'll kind of go over this a little later on in the presentation, but the speaking area is the same for all the contests. The contestants must stand to deliver their speech and be shown from the waist up. The overall speaking area is the borders of the computer screen, and the contestants must remain in that border at all times. Next slide. What does the contest chair do during the contest? Well, you open the contest with a brief introduction. You inform the audiences that the rules have been reviewed with the chief judge and the contestants. The contestants have been informed of the location of the timing lights. On Zoom, that's going to be a little bit difficult. They'll need to pin the timer up in the corner for themselves. You'll introduce each contest speaker, as we saw today during our model speakers, the speaker's name, the title of the speech, the title of the speech, the speaker's name. You do that with each contestant the same way. Upon completion of the speeches, you ask for the voting judges and the tie-breaking judge to complete their ballots. And at that time, that new rule that Lynn mentioned, that you then ask the chief judge if all the ballots have been collected before you proceed, that needs to be done at this point. After he or she acknowledges that those ballots have been received, then you can start interviewing your speakers. You can collect and announce the results. And if there's any protest or disqualifications to be announced, you'll do that at that time. And you thank everybody for their participation. Next slide.
And now we're back to me.
And now you're back to you.
All right. All right. Any questions before we proceed past Bill's section on the contest chair's responsibilities? Jill. Jill raised your
Hi.
hand. There
Yes,
you
sorry.
are.
Hi, my name is Jill Kipnis, and I was the contest manager for the district last year. I've been area director for Palo Verde 2 this year, so it's my first time being a contest chair. I just want to confirm, and just so I fully understand, and maybe so everybody else fully understands, the judges are completing their ballots in the main room. They are not being sent to the breakout room to complete their ballots.
Correct.
Okay,
To
so the
complete
only,
your ballots. Counting is done in a separate room.
so the only people, and probably gonna go through this now with Chief Judge, so I apologize. So the only people that are gonna be sent to a breakout room are the ballot counters and the Chief Judge.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Unless there's a protest.
Right. Unless there's a protest. All right.
Okay, but in like,
Yeah, which completely throws everything into a completely different discussion.
correct. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk a little bit about a chief judge. As Bill started with, when you're doing a role in a contest, you want a checklist. You want something that says, yes, I have completed this task. Yes, I have completed this task. And when you get to the end of the list, you know, hey, we're ready for a contest. So for your chief judge, their role is to appoint and support the voting judges, counters, timers, and the tie-breaking judge. Many hands make light work, and many hands make a fair and unbiased contest. The chief judge also will act as your chief ballot counter, and they will conduct the judges briefing, which is the exact opposite of the contestants. The judges will be told in what order they're speaking, so it's held after the contestants have been briefed. It reviews the guides and ballots, talks about the judge's certificate of eligibility. Judges must sign that and their code of ethics. And this is kind of important even in Zoom, is what's the speaking area? We're going to touch on that in just a little bit. The speaking area in Zoom is also important to pay attention to. And we're going to brief the functionaries. So we're going to talk about timing of a contest, and we're going to talk about the counting of ballots as we go through this one. So we're in the briefing with all our functionaries. This is usually done in a breakout room and Zoom. And we're going to talk about the voting judges to make sure they have the correct ballots and they've filled out their paperwork, that the timers have the time record sheet. They need to have that too. And then instructions for timers, just how to use everything, make sure they know, we're doing humorous and international. Those are both 5 to 7. But if we were doing tall tales, I think that one is 3 to 4, if I remember correct. The evaluation is 2 to 3. Table topics is 1 to 2. So you want to make sure people know what they're doing before they start doing it. Ballot counters want to know how we're going to gather ballots, and they want to know that they're going to go off into, if you get the invitation, they've got to accept to move off into the breakout room. And then the chief judge is the only person who knows who the tie-breaking judge is. And so they don't come to the briefing. Everything they do, they turn in only to the chief judge, including their ballot. So let's now spend a little time on the rule book itself. And what we're going to talk about is this is from the newest rule book that was just produced by Toastmasters for the 2022-2023 contest season. It has a general set of rules that apply to every contest, doesn't matter. So if you're looking to have all the tools, you want a copy of this before you begin your contest. It talks for each specific contest about what the specific elements of each contest type are, including timing And remember that rules change. So each time you go through a rule book, you want to know what are the changes that we're going to make. Because if you are a VPE or an area or division director, you need to make sure you understand the rules of your contest. We as Toastmasters only have a specific group of contests. We can't just throw a contest in that doesn't exist and isn't supported. And no other contest of any type can be conducted by the district. This does not mean other clubs. I think everybody might be familiar with the, I think it's the Blue Toastmasters out in the East Valley holds a humorous contest every year, not affiliated with the district. Every district must conduct an international speech contest, and it's got to be done in English. And the district level contest must be held at the district conference. Every contest follows the same progression. The clubs have it first, followed by the areas, the division, and then the district. In order to be eligible to participate, you have to be a paid member of a club that is in good standing. If I paid my dues, but my club only has 5 members and didn't turn in anyone else's dues, we're not in good standing. So for those of you who are helping people get ready to compete, make sure they know that. This one's huge and it's a big change. An international competitor must have earned a level 1 or 2 on any path earned a DTM. So if I've completed 10 speeches in the Competent Communicator Manual, am I eligible to compete in international this year, y'all? Nobody knows?
No, you
No,
would
you
not.
can't compete.
You are not. You are not eligible to participate unless you completed level 1 or 2 in a path, or under the old program, earned your DTM, your Distinguished Toastmaster. There is special rules for clubs that charter within the current year, but this is something that anyone who knows competitors and knows people who maybe haven't completed their DTM might want to make sure they know about these rules. All right, a side note, there are special rules associated with props, including electronics. So if you're using them, make sure you know what those rules are. Contestants have to tell the chair, and both the chair and the contestant need to review and understand those guidelines. All right, let's talk about who's not eligible to compete. If you are currently serving basically at any district level or above Toastmaster term that's expiring this Toastmaster year, you may not participate, and that includes the immediate past. Anyone who's running for an elected office next year. So if today you decide, Julia, that you're going to run for district director next year, you are not eligible to compete the moment you make that decision. That is something we want to be very clear on. That didn't used to be that way. If you are serving as a contest official in the same contest you're competing on, you're not eligible. So that means your voting, tie-breaking, and chief judges at the above the club level cannot serve be competing in that contest, even in another area. But it also includes your timer, your ballot counter, your sergeant at arms. Anybody else who is competing in international can't do any of the rules and the roles in international. And that is a new change. So make sure everybody's really clear on that. If you're doing anything for the contest, you also can't be competing, even if it's not in this contest, but it's that same. So you're international at one area versus international at a different area. You can't help. You're a competitor. Everybody clear on that? And if we are at a public place and we are having presenters of educational sessions, contest chairs, Toastmasters, anybody else who's involved in the event is not eligible to compete. Okay. To be a judge, what do you have to do to compete? Well, or to judge, you have to, of course, be a member. You have to be a paid member of a club in good standing, just like a contestant. You have to have been a member at an area division for at least 6 months. And you must have completed at least 6 competent communicator speeches if you're talking about a non-pathways person, or level 1 and 2 for a pathway. Everybody else who's involved in this contest must be a paid member. And just another reminder, and this one's a big one, if you are currently an area or division director and you're going to run next year for division or trio, so you're moving up the chain, you're running for an elected office, you cannot be your own contest official. So somebody else has to be the face and the voice of your contest. You have to have a Toastmaster present for you. You can't present it yourself. For example, at the district level, normally our program quality director is the person who leads the contest, is the contest face, the person who does all the talking. If that person's running for district director, they can't do that. There has to be a contest Toastmaster.
Doesn't that mean if they've already announced?
Yes, and by the time we get to district source, you've already announced. So
And
yeah, if you're running from the floor, you could probably sneak in. But if you've gone through the election procedures, you've gone before the committee that decides these things, you cannot run your own contest. You can be the contest, you can be the back, you can be the guy in the back pulling all the strings, but you can't be the face of your contest. Somebody had a question.
Jill had her hand up.
Hi, back to the previous slide. If someone competed in a club contest, but they're not moving on to the area contest, can that person still fill a functionary role on at the area level?
Yes, because they're no longer competing.
Okay, can they be a judge?
Yes, they're no longer competing.
Okay, thank you.
So if it said competed, but it says competing, so you must be active. So once you lose at the area level, you absolutely are eligible to be any official at the division level. Lose at the division, you can now play at the district. Does that help?
It does, and I think that makes life easier for everyone. So thank you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. All
And
right,
Laura
so
Laura has her hand up, Lynn.
yes.
yes, at the district contest, if the district board meeting has been held several days beforehand and the contest is completed, the election is completed, can that person still do the contest?
Well, since those two events technically should both take place at the district conference, I would say they cannot.
Okay.
And I can, if somebody really feels we're that close in numbers, I will definitely reach out to World Headquarters, Lori, to clarify if you think someone's going to be in that position. All right, so what don't we do in a speech? Contest speeches have to be original. It must be at less than 25% referencing anything else, and that must be attributed. And this is a new rule. A speaker may not reference another speaker or their speech within the same contest. How many times have you guys heard someone do that? I know personally, I raise my hand. I've heard people do that all the time. You use them as an example. It just happened. You can't do it. If you do it, you've disqualified yourself. A speaker must speak from within the identified speaking area, and props cannot be set up during the moment of silence. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's got to be silent. So we've talked a lot about these things. So I was going to make sure we touch on at the club and area level, you have to have 5 judges. You have to have 5 judges. You have to have a tiebreaker, a couple of counters, a couple of timers. At the club level, if that's impractical, do what you've got to do, plus the chair and the chief judge. At the division, you got to have at least 7 judges. And at the district, they require 1 more counter. So there are some, if you are using people from within your area there and you're chosen someone to be a judge who's a member of a club, you have to have every club where there's a speaker represented. If you're working with people outside your area who to be your judges, that doesn't apply. But if there is a single judge who is a member of one club, it has to be 1 from everything. At the division plus level, no judge can share a club with the contestant. Remember, voters must remain anonymous. And remember that a contest chair can appoint a contest Toastmaster. If you have a contest Toastmaster at any level, they can't compete. Basically, remember, if you're a face of the organization in any way, you can't be part of this competition. All right, so at the contest, we remember that the introductions are done by the chair and Toastmaster. We all heard Julia and Don introduce their speech. It's their name, their title, their name. It's that way always. Contestants can stay in the same room. Each contest has different requirements for their people. It is the chief judge's responsibility to know what those are, of who can compete and who can participate. And after the contest, make sure as a chief judge, you get that tie-breaking ballot and the timer sheet. And if just for anybody out there who needs to know this, if the district level winner can't compete, the second highest place can compete at the regional level. Now let's run real quick through a little bit about timing. There's 2 timers. 1 person owns the sheet, 1 person owns the signaling device. They need to understand how to use green, yellow, and red. Most Toastmasters do, right? Make sure you know the timing requirement for every single speech and what the grace period is. And you cannot have fractions. That's new this year. If someone speaks for 7 minutes, 7.31 seconds, that one is a fraction. You can't use it. So they have exceeded 7.3. They have exceeded time. You don't go to 7.3, 3.5 to make that happen. So make sure you understand the grace periods and that timing begins at the first verbal or nonverbal engagement. If you're speaking, you're staring at the ground and all of a sudden you snap your head up and stare out at your audience, you've engaged your audience and you begin the timing. Counting, pretty much the basics. It's done in a separate space. We'll do a breakout room for these. On your counter sheet, you're going to give 3 points for the person's first place rank, 2 points for the second, 1 point. You put the totals all together. Everybody makes sure that they've validated those points, and that ranked bottom to top is how we have the counter sheet turned in. Any questions about any of that?
Yeah, Lynn.
Yes.
Kathy had a question about how are the ballots collected on Zoom?
That will depend on who, what the methodology your club or area division decides to use. We are anticipating using a voting tool at the district level, and hopefully before that, we're going to talk hopefully a little bit about it when we get to the end. But you can either text the person, you can use Zoom chat to send them in, you can send a document to your chief judge. However, your chief judge advises you to send in those votes. Does that help?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When there is a protest, I never seen a protest. What is the best way to protest?
We're going to talk about that right here. All right.
Well, I'm thinking that if somebody just stand up or
well, in a Zoom, it's actually kind of because the protest must be lodged with the chief judge. So either someone's going to come up in person to the chief judge, or they're going to reach out on Zoom to the chief judge, and they're going to say they have a protest. The only person who can protest a eligibility is the contest chair. So that should have been done most likely before we started. But judges and other contestants can protest originality or the reference to another contestant's speech in that same contest. So those two types of protests can be received from a judge or a contestant who would reach out directly to the chief judge, and that's how you enter a protest.
Okay.
And when they enter that, they have to tell them what they're protesting, and then the person who is being protested has to have a chance to respond, in which case all the judges, I think Betty said this earlier, would be pulled into a breakout room to discuss this with the contestant who is being protested. That person would then leave. The judges would take a majority rule and say, are we in the decision to disqualify? And if the DQ decision is made, it is final. All right, finally, to announce the winner, we hand off the counting sheet to the contest chair or Toastmaster. The chief judge owns completing the notification of winner and provides the contest chair at the next level all the tools they need, and everybody gets rid of everything else. Remember, if you are a contest chair or Toastmaster announcing a winner, you have to announce the DQs due to disqualifications due to time. You do not name who was disqualified. If there's 3 or more contestants, you announce the order in third through first. If it's fewer than 3, it's second and first are the only ones announced. All right, so remember that you have to announce the winners by the end of the event. If you have more than one contest, you will individually adjourn the international contest and call to order the humorous contest. But you can wait until the end to announce them both. Announcement of winner is final unless the list is announced incorrectly, in which case 3 people can say, hey, wait, stop. And that's the chief judge, the ballot counters, or the timers that can call point of order and stop the announcement. Any questions about those things? All right. Couple of things we need to make sure we're clear on virtual. Audio must be clear and without echo, static, or excessive noise. That is the responsibility. These are the responsibilities of the contestant. They have to have a good camera. It's only a single use camera, we're not filming a movie here. You can't use a follow me feature. Put that camera someplace where it will remain stable and there won't be unwanted movement. Make sure it has a unobstructed in focus view of the contestant, and your speaking area must be visible throughout the entire recording. Lighting, the speaking area should be fully lit so that your facial expressions can be seen, and don't point a light directly at the camera. And this is actually important all the way up because a regional chief judge could disqualify the district submission for the next level if we don't meet these qualifications, but this is the expectation of every contestant. If there is a recording, it's going to only include the introduction and the name of the speech and then the entire speech. And you can't edit that. You can't add emojis or anything like that to the presentation. Nothing can be added or changed. That's all that's supposed to be there. So looking at these speakers, we can see that these are our speaking area. Every person in this speech is in the speaking area, but the gentleman in just the face, we're not seeing him from the waist up. If he gave his whole speech like that, he's not really meeting the criteria of this contest. And look at this one. This, can everyone see just the finger that's in the speaking area? Absolutely. If your finger is in the speaking area, you are in the speaking area. You have to stay in your speaking area the whole speech, at least your finger. So even at the second slide, the gentleman who's almost all the way gone, he's there. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about the virtual contest tool that we're going to use. I was going to play the video for you, but we're getting tight on time. So instead, I'm going to tell you that if you go to YouTube and you go to contesttoastmost.org, is what you're looking for, you're going to see a tool that we are experimenting with right now. What that tool does is it lets you set up your entire contest timing, judges, and using that tool, you can get all your results and everything turned in a way that has been blessed by the Toastmasters International as something that we can do. And so I'm not going to play the video for you right now. I'm going to stop sharing to take your questions, but be aware that we are going to be communicating more about this. We're going to be putting something out on the district website if we decide to do it. But right now it looks really nice. The judges get a link in the email. They respond to that link. It takes them to a website. They put their judging notes in there. They put their top 3, they submit, it comes to the chief judge, and it basically does the math for you. So ballot counters, everybody high five. It also allows the timers to be there. So if there's a disqualification of time, that's automatically submitted as well. So we're really got our fingers crossed that we're going to have something out to you guys to use in time for contest season that will automate some of these judging questions that you guys have had. If we don't, then we will, same way we've done it in the past, we will have out, send your text, send your chat, whatever it might be. All right.
Did I understand you to say that only the chief judge would get those forms and not the ballot counters?
The ballot counters will be using a dashboard if we use this. And there's a dashboard that is for the chief judge, the ballot counters, and it basically just, if you want to watch the video, go do so. It takes about 5 minutes if you put it on 1.5 time. And it says how to set it up and shows you what it does. And it's really quite cool. We've played, but we haven't finished playing. So that's why I'm not ready to introduce it to y'all yet. So I see we had a lot of chats. Did we answer all of those as I was talking, Bill?
Leanne just had one that she wanted to know the responsibility of the contest manager.
Bill, what are your responsibilities?
And, the contest manager is basically a person that runs the whole back end of the contest. You put them in place so you don't have to, as a chair, you don't have to worry about a lot of things. They make sure that everybody's in place. What else can they do, Lynn? I'm kind of stammering.
That's
here.
kind of it. Is that they're kind of like the vice president of education.
They're the grunt worker.
Right. They make sure the agenda is together. They make sure all the people are in the right place. They make sure they're the safety net, so the rest of us don't fall through. That everything gets done correctly. And Jill had asked a question on the chat about level 1, level 2 in the current year. No, it's just level 1, level 2. If you completed those 2 years ago, that's fine too. It's not the current, nothing about competing is this year. It's your current designation. Like I'm a I think I'm a level 5. I'm an MS 5 because I've completed motivational strategies path. So I've got 5 levels done. And that will stay with me forever unless I continue on to my DTM.
But you already do.
Yeah, which I already did. So,
So you qualify on that.
I qualify on that one, right? And I have Jim has raised his hand. Jim?
Yes. Will you talked about checklists. I know the PowerPoint slide was there, but can you make available to us maybe a PDF of what the checklists are? So that way, you know, we
They are
have that.
they are actually hopefully, and I didn't check right before we started, I should have. Our web team was moving last year's contest information to this year's contest folder. There is contest folder on aztoastmasters.org, which has contest checklist, as does the international website, and all the judging and counting and everything else forms you'll ever need for a contest are in that location. And hopefully, if we do this right, this presentation will also land there.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Is that I
Yes.
don't know who that was. I'm sorry.
Amy,
Amy, yes.
Yes, I do not know how to use the chat feature, raise your hand. I've seen it before. I'm just not familiar with Zoom very much. But I do have a question as far as a contestant. Who do I email my questions to as a contestant? Because this is my first time.
Right. Your vice president of education is your first level of support. If
Okay.
you still need help, judges at aztoastmasters.org.
Okay, as far as a ring light, because if you can tell here, where am I at? Okay, you see me, I'm blacked out. I don't have good lighting. Even when I have the overhead light on, it's not that great. I've seen a couple of ring lights on Zoom and it's 6 inches or 10 inches and they're more halogen type. They're yellow, not, you know, multicolored. What would you recommend as far as the width and the color of brightness?
Without knowing your space, it's really something that I would say, get whatever you get the good deal on, do it and practice with members of your club to make sure you look good. Like Lori looks fantastic up there. Lori has some kind of great lighting going.
I have a ring light. I'm not sure how big it is. I got it on Amazon. It has 2 or 3 different colors on it.
Thanks, Lori.
Okay, because mine is this type. You can see it's kind of whites me out and I can do different features.
Yeah, I would definitely say play with it with a member of your club.
Okay, great. And I'll reach out to my club as far as briefing. How do I know about briefing? I remember.
Yeah, that should definitely come from your vice president of education.
And attire, as far as appropriate attire. That would
Again,
also come from
there's no hard fast rule to that. I definitely would not wear bikini. I think that might be perceived differently. It might affect your effectiveness score.
I'm not, we're not even going there, but as far as how, so as far as how I'm talking now, is that okay for speech competition, the room?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, let's answer some of the questions. I'm just going to go across my screen. Betty, you have your hand up.
As far as judges are concerned, I just want to point out that the 5 and 7 you were talking about are minimums, not maximums.
Absolutely.
If you're a contest chief judge and someone you know to be a qualified judge says, hey, would you like more judges? The answer is always yes.
Absolutely. More judges, more perceptions. All right. How about you, Heather?
Thank you, Lynn. So can you hear me okay? I changed my audio. Oh, perfect. I do have a question for you because I'm taking tons of notes and I have links for all these checklists and things. So I'm going to get started now to be prepared contest season. But as a contest chair, and maybe on behalf of others who may not know this, do we have links or things out there that might have some sort of, I don't know, like a script that we'll know what we're going to be saying, things like that, that we can review actual footage that we can be comfortable with doing the presentation we need?
That Google is your best friend in that respect, including the AZ Toastmasters. There is absolutely things out there that can be downloaded for script, for timing, for everything else you can think of for a club. Never try to invent a wheel in Toastmasters. It's been invented, just like this judging method that I'm going to go out and look at. I was about to invent one and I found that one instead. So
perfect.
That's what I've done there.
Thank you. I just wanted a comfort level on what I'm going to be doing here.
And you have my email from the front of this presentation as well. And I'm on the district website. Reach out to me on any questions you guys have.
Thank you.
Jill, you had some questions?
I do, just one more question regarding materials. And last year we had prepared emails and such to go out to our functionaries and our judges. Are those emails still going to be available to us to use?
If they existed out on the site last year, they are still there. And
Great.
we're trying to get everything moved in that respect. But if I missed something, Jill, please email me and tell me I missed it because I'll go get that fixed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right. Anybody else have anything for us this morning? All right. Fantastic. Well, I want to say thank you for coming and giving me somebody to talk to this morning. As you probably noticed, I do not like talking to myself. And I enjoy it when you guys engage with me. I enjoy it when you engage in something like this. It's because it shows your commitment to the district and your commitment to our organization. Bill, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't, just thanking everybody for attending.
Yep.
Wonderful.